Hey, nice Atypical Daydream t-shirt.
Thanks. It's my favorite podcast.
Mine too. But where can I get a t-shirt?
It's easy. The link is in the show notes.
That is easy. I'm gonna go get one right now.
That's a great idea.
Thanks. Bye.
You bet. Stay cool.
I remember that feeling of like being claimed in this moment, right? Being claimed by this place. And I remember it with so much affection and so much warmth, these like tiny moments of embrace.
Hello, my atypical daydreamers. Welcome to the podcast. It's episode 51, which also happens to be my age. If you told me in my early 20s that at 51 I'd be living in Europe and making podcasts, I probably would have said, what's a podcast? This road trip we call life is full of wild turns and surprises. Now that is the truth. My guest today is Nitya Chambers. She is the Senior Vice President of Content and Executive Editor at Lonely Planet. You know, so many of the stories on this podcast are about setting out in search of new adventures, discovering who we are through adversity. And while those journeys are often filled with excitement and danger and mystery, we can easily overlook the stories about coming home. But today, Nitya takes us to India and the roots of her family, where there's nothing more powerful than being embraced and seen for who you truly are.
So I think like one of the most amazing things about travel to me is this notion of you're holding two things at once. And one of the really amazing things is there's a real sense of wherever you go, there you are. So there aren't things like if you were in a bad mood when you left, that bad mood is probably not going to miraculously disappear. There's going to be, especially in a world where we're all tethered to our phones, like you're still getting text messages about the annoying thing that happened. And so there is like a kind of a limited amount of escape you can do when you're tethered to the world. But I think the second part of it is what I think is always the promise and hope of travel, which is maybe I'm someone different in this other place. And maybe there is going to be some amazing thing I've never experienced before, some scenario backdrop I've never stood against that is going to make me find a part of myself that has just been dormant my whole life. The place that has defined this the most to me is really my relationship with India. My parents are Indian immigrants. They came here in the 70s. I came here with them when I was, just 1 year old. And my life has been defined as an American, as someone who grew up in Western Pennsylvania in a place that I didn't look like anyone else. I was constantly navigating that identity in a place and in the 80s where we didn't live in a world where information had been quite so democratized. So there was, as a child, you're doing a lot of education all the time, what it means to be from another place, what it means to be a different religion. I was raised as a Hindu, what these traditions mean. And I'm doing that with parents that also don't have a frame of reference for the American life that I live every day. They didn't know what it was like to go to this school and, 1985, the vegetarian option for pizza was to pull the pepperoni off the pizza, right? Like there were details in the world I was navigating that they were unfamiliar with. And they were trying to root me in a place that they were clearly very homesick for, and I think they were homesick for it, but they were also becoming American themselves. And I think that duality and that relationship with India really has shaped me in so many ways. And I was thinking a lot in preparation for this conversation just about the first trip I took to India where I was 8 years old. And I remember, this plane ride. I think we took like TWA. Appropriate, kind of thing you can orient into that time. I remember it's the longest flight I've ever taken. I remember people smoking on the airplane because you could do that then. And I remember, looking out the window. We flew from London to New Delhi to Bombay, and got out of the place in Bombay, Mumbai now, Bombay then. And I remember looking out the window, and it was dark, and I don't know what I thought I was going to see, but these glimpses of the land, the twinkling lights, looking for some sense of connection. How is this place going to look and feel and be different than the world that I know? And again, I think you have to, it's hard. It is so hard. My husband and I were trying to explain to our kids what it was like then, right? Like you had family albums, looking at pictures, but there was no frame of reference for what like a streetscape was. Like there might be a picture of a Taj Mahal, there's a picture of the Gateway of India, there's a picture of the Meenakshi Temple, but there's not like, this is what the street looks like. This is a video of like what you're going to encounter. So at that point, the world I knew was like suburban Western Pennsylvania. Like I have such sort of palpable, like sensory memories of like what it felt to come off of that plane. The sort of the mixture of like the way air conditioning and diesel and jasmine flowers, like they just commingle into this very specific scent that if I smell it today, it makes my heart, which is usually when you're getting off a plane in India, but it just catches my heart and it like holds it. The way that like the humidity kind of hangs on you, the way that the traffic sounds, right? Like they're all like kind of a cacophony of like horns. You have like lorries and like the trucks, you have bicycle horns, you have Autoricksha beeping, which is its own sort of like high pitch, kind of aggressive barks, kind of punctuating everything. And I have such memories of coming out of the airport, being just enveloped by family, being in a car, being jet lagged, but so hyper aware of this world coming to life around me. And I think the thing that startled me that I didn't even really know to expect was the idea that this was this first time in my life. And I don't think my parents knew how to prepare me for it because they weren't thinking of it from my shoes. Like I had never been somewhere where I looked like everybody else. So you're blending in, but at the same time, the same way you can walk out in the place you live and if someone is from there or not. Like the Indian people that lived there knew that I was coming from somewhere else, the way that I dressed, the way that I talked, maybe the way I did my hair and held myself. I certainly maybe not at first glance, but I don't think anyone was mistaking me for not being from somewhere else. But for me, not having to kind of carry that like otherness, it's just a very, it is a memory that has like stayed with me of what that meant to kind of be in a place where you're sort of experiencing that for the first time as a child. I think about that a lot because I think of the way that, how we exist in the worlds that we're part of, what it means to belong to them, and what it means, when you live between them or across them, or you get the privilege of belonging in multiple places.
Hey, it's Josh. Hope you're enjoying the podcast. And if so, are you wanting more road stories? Well, good news. I've got you covered. Consider becoming a patron. You'll have access to loads of great bonus stories that there just wasn't time for. And you'll be supporting a truly independent podcast. Find the link in the show notes. And thanks. Now back to the show.
I think there was a connection that was probably instantaneous that I didn't recognize. I think that as I reflect on it, and especially as I think about like what it means to travel somewhere today, it was such a privilege to go somewhere and stay in someone's house. We stayed with my grandparents. And I think like we stayed with aunts and uncles. And at the time, would I have given my right arm to be in a hotel? Probably, right? Like it was cramped. I'm sure it was inconvenient to the people that hosted us because we would go for like a full summer vacation. We were kind of all crowded into like 1-2 bedroom apartments sometimes. But I think that it was such a privilege to be part of the daily rhythms of a life in another country, what it meant to live in a culture where, certainly at that time and with my grandparents, they went to the market almost every day and bought fresh vegetables, and then they cooked at home. And there were vegetable sellers that kind of came through their apartment complex. I remember one summer I was in high school. It was right after I graduated from high school, and I spent the summer by myself with them. And I remember it was June. There's not central air conditioning. So there's balconies and there's ceramic tiles on the floor and fans. And they had air conditioning in one room, and they would turn it on the unit, and we would all sleep in that room, like kind of in a row. And that was a cooling effort at night. But then during the day, you just sort of went about your business, tried not to go out when it was the hottest in the day. But I remember the day the monsoon started. You could feel it hanging, the rain in the air, and it was like hot, and the air was just getting so thick. And I remember being in my grandparents' apartment at night. It was like 8:30. It was June, and you hear the first crack of thunder, and you could hear people cheering, and because it was this relief from the heat. And obviously in societies that have an agrarian core, and obviously they lived in a city, it was not a farm, but the agrarian culture that is so much a part of India's heritage is just, it exists through everything. So I think that sense of like the need for rain, what that means for your harvest, what that means for the way the rhythm of an agricultural society moves is just kind of embedded in how everyone lives. And there was just a cheer. And I just never, it was a real communal moment, right? Like you were experiencing this weather event together in a way that was experiential. It wasn't like we were out on TikTok and everyone's, posting about the storm. It was in the air. It was outside. It was like something you were reacting to. And I can recall sitting on their couch and hearing that and sort of experiencing it like it happened yesterday. And I feel so fortunate. And I think about this when I think about how to give travel experiences to my kids, because, my parents, it was a priority to them to go see their parents in India. And so we prioritized that time. My parents live in Pittsburgh. So when we prioritize seeing them, we're going to Western Pennsylvania. We're not crossing the globe. So, I think about how much those experiences shaped me. And I think about how to give them to my kids, because I just think that getting to be part of the rhythm of a place that way, it's such a special, magical thing. To kind of go back to what I was saying at the beginning, I think like there is still throughout all of that, this sense of who am I and where am I and who am I in this place that I'm in? I remember on that trip, we had gone to like a historical site in India, and I'd gotten dropped off. They were like going to park, and there are two lines. One of the lines was a foreign passports line, and one of the lines was a citizens line. And I am like rule following person. This goes back to that sense of looking like everyone else, but also wanting to be rules abiding. It's like when, especially like in India, like you go to some of those ticketing lines, people are like, look official, it might be like a historical site, but there are like police and and so I get into the foreigners line, a lot of people that, didn't like quote, look Indian. And this policeman is like, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, I'm a US citizen. I'm in the foreigners line. And he's like, no, you go over to that line. It was so affectionate. He was like claiming me in that moment, right? He's like, what are you doing over here? Like, you go to the other line. Like, and I was like, no, and he was like, I was like, you don't understand. He's like, no, like, go. I remember that feeling of like being claimed in this moment, right? Being claimed by this place. And it was really, I remember it with so much affection and so much warmth, these like tiny moments of embrace. It's like, you know, funny and joyful, and like a reflection on sort of like, who am I relative to the place that I'm in?
I want to thank Nitya for sharing her experience. Be sure to visit lonelyplanet.com. Use the code DAYDREAM and grab 30% off their amazing travel books through the holidays. And while you're at it, sign up for their newsletter or follow them on Instagram. Links in the show notes. Now, if you haven't already, could you take 2 minutes to rate or review Atypical Daydream wherever you listen? Think of it as your good deed of the day. This podcast is created and produced by me, Josh Caldwell. Music by Visual Aid, my side music project. General support and copywriting by Miranda Caldwell. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come back next time.